You are listening to the Gritty Podcast, where we talk about all things gritty. All right, folks, welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Call. Today's guest is Mark Livesay. Mark is an expert on e-scouting. In fact, he has created a course called e-scouting for elk. It's made by Treeline Pursuits, which is his company. It's an amazing course. I've talked about it many times, but on this episode, we sit down and we talk about e-scouting, of course. He's a wealth of information. Do me a favor, if you like the show and you like what Mark is doing and you have not purchased the e-scouting course, use the code GRITTY, go over there, save yourself some money, get the course. This is one of those things where you learn it one time and you get to have it the rest of your life. You sit down, it's like 30 hours or more of learning. Sit down, spend a couple hours a week learning it until you get it down, and it will absolutely change everything about your hunting experience. Even advanced hunters who have attended these Western hunting summits where we were just at, people come to that event that are experts that sit down and listen to Mark, and their minds are blown, where they learn things that they never knew about e-scouting. Mark really has taken that knowledge to the next level, and he really does provide a comprehensive course on how to hunt, really. He doesn't get into the deep tactics of elk hunting itself, but he gets into where to find them, which is step one. It's huge. So check that out. Go to Treeline Pursuits, get his course, and also check out Grakksaw game bags. The season is coming up soon. Our buddy Austin, who owns Grakksaw, he makes those orange game bags. They're super tiny, compact. Ryan and I have been using them now like 5 years. We love them. So go check them out. Help out Austin. He's just a small-time business owner. It's called Grakksaw. The link is in the description field of the YouTube videos that we create. And then check out Sheep Feet. If you're getting ready to head into the season, got lots of hiking ahead of you, these custom orthotics are worth every penny, so check them out, Sheep Feet, and use the code GRITTY over there. And finally, use the code GRITTY over at Stealthy Nutrition. We recorded this hunt at the Western Hunting Summit that Ryan and Hillary put on, and anytime you shop over there, it helps them continue to do what they do. And Ryan makes an awesome rifle cover. They make a great glassing pad. And, of course, all the nutritional products that they have are wonderful. So go over there, check that out. Use the code GRITTY at Stealthy Nutrition. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoy the show. Let me know in the comments below, and stay gritty. All right, folks, welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Call, and today my guest is Mark Livesay, and we are at the Western Hunting Summit in beautiful Montana. And you and I stole away for a few minutes from all the seminars that are going down right now.
Joel's over there just waxing eloquence on his elk calling.
Iron mine shooting and elk calling.
Yeah. So while Joe's doing that, we're going to sneak in a little podcast here.
Yep. And I wanted to get into elk. You and I have some elk trips this year. And what I wanted to do was, you have narrowed down, I think it's a great exercise. You've narrowed down a couple of places that have been on your mind for a number of years. In fact, maybe tell that story how one of the guys in our group, Bryce, kind of has this spot, and then you have a spot, and then you both came up with the same area. How does that happen?
We all know he couldn't have found this spot on his own.
Sorry, Bryce.
So Bryce is the owner of Peaks Equipment, and I've gotten to know him, and I can call him a friend now. He's really a great guy. But anyway, we got to talking one day, and guys don't like to give up their spots. He was kind of dropping some hints about, I think I know what you're talking about. And he said, "What do you mean?" I kind of said, then he goes, "Oh, yeah, that's pretty close." I'm like, "No, that's exactly the spot." And so we got.
That's an uncomfortable conversation.
Yeah. So we kind of just accepted the fact that we on a similar spot. But he has been coming into this because they drive in with a vehicle.
Yeah.
So, or a 4-wheel drive kind of thing. So he's been coming in from the east side of the range, and I am bringing my llama trailer in, and that road is really rough for a llama trailer. So I've been coming in a little steeper, maybe not as long, but a better road to get my llamas in. I've been coming in from the east side. So it's a huge area, but I've been coming from the east. He's been coming from the west. I've been hunting this pocket that's not exactly his spot, and he's been hunting a pocket that's not exactly mine. But we both have been funny. We've both been wanting to go to the same spot that's in between our two spots. And so he's like, man, we can't go there without llamas.
And what about that spot, other than it's remote?
Okay.
Right?
Like what features about it?
Yeah, why that spot and not just where you're hunting already?
Okay, so that probably, let's back up a little bit about it. So that's the baker. So basically,
How does it feel, by the way? Because here's your wife, Amy. She just got done running with the dog Bridger up and down the road. She's a badass athlete. And then there's you. I feel like, you're not pulling your weight, or rather maybe you are in this relationship.
She's, when we
she's an animal, dude.
We used to do Ironmans, and she kept going. I didn't. I train enough to kind of survive. Here's the deal, Brian. I'm just going to call a spade a spade. I am blessed to hunt enough that I just hunt myself into shape.
Yeah.
So hopefully by the time you show up maybe late September, I'll be in pretty decent shape. So, So
okay. So back to the question is, how does the spot? What is it about the spot? Because a lot of guys go, I just want to go here because it's way far away from everything else. But sometimes what they're doing is they're leaving an area that has a lot of elk, going to a remote area that has almost no game,
elk, right?
And is not a good hunting spot. And just because it's remote, that's not the only reason. That's a big factor in today's world where it's competitive. But gosh, man, I've done that so many times where we had a goal. We hiked 10 or 15 miles into a spot only to find that there's nothing there.
Right. Guys, so here's the deal. Man, there's a lot to that question. But so remoteness, I get a lot of Oregon, Washington guys in my course, right? Mm-hmm. Lots of guys. And the number one question is, man, there's so many roads. There's so much access. How do I do the zones of pressure? How do I analyze? Mm-hmm. In the course, we talk about analyzing where all the pressure is going to come from. How do I do that in the area with all the roads? In reality, it's easier to find elk. I know this is going to sound bizarre. It's easier to find elk with high pressure than it is in a remote area. Because when those elk you got this giant remote area, they can be anywhere, right?
Right.
But when there's heavy pressure,
there's just a few pockets.
They're going to be pushed to very identifiable areas. Right. Now, you got to look for them, and you got to really fet them out. But in reality, sometimes it's easier. And the wolves and all these things, the elk are learning to adapt over the time. So I like to hunt more remote areas, and mainly because I just like to hunt elk that are not being pressured. I don't like to run into people. I'm kind of antisocial. The more time I spend around lampers, the more I'm like, I don't like people. And so I just like the experience. I'd rather hunt less elk and have a better experience than fight people with more elk.
Right.
Like Colorado is a perfect example. Guys, tons of dudes, right? Yep. But 300,000 elk, you can't argue with the populations of elk in Colorado. Double almost any other state. And it's not going down. Yep. They're not hardly putting a dent in them, even with that number of people. So you're working more pressure, but the elk are still there. And so be careful about what you wish for, right? Mm-hmm. The other thing about hiking in, like you just said, it's a big investment. You go in 10 miles, it's a couple of days of investment or more, 3 or 4 days.
Sometimes it's up a canyon, and there's no going over the top.
Right.
You go all the way back. The Eagle Caps are notorious for this. You go all the way back. There's really no huntable area other than the little channel you're in. And you scour it, and there's just nothing in there all the way to the back. There's no plan B.
Right.
There's hike 12 miles back.
That's plan B is hiking out. So you got to just, really decide what you want. But
I always assumed that El Dorado held all the elk.
The furthest you are.
If I just went far, they'd all be there.
Yeah, and sometimes I kind of get that way too because I like to hunt remote. I just still do, but I'm calculated. So back to your question, guys. Guys get caught up on one feature, like they hear north slopes. They love elk on north slopes. Fires. People like to hunt elk in fires. Drainages with no trails in the bottom. Certain degrees of slopes, benches that are half or three, all these things, right?
They look for the one or two that are their money indicators.
That's just, they've seen elk there before, and they become tunnel vision. And what I call it is they make themselves a 1 or 2 dimensional elk hunter. The thing about this spot that we're going to, There's a lot of things this thing has. It has north slope. It has high water. It has open feed areas.
What do you call that when there's like all these factors?
They're stacking them. I like to stack. It's called odds multiplication is what I say.
Odds multiplication.
The more I analyze about 12 elk finding features in my course. From saddles to benches to canyons to fires to beetle kills to slope degrees to slope orientation. All of those factors to me are prime elk holding habitats. And when I can find a place that has, let's say, 4 or 5 of those 12, I get excited, right? I don't get excited necessarily about one. So, and this spot, one of the other things I've done, I'm going to share this tip. This is going to be a good one here. But these statistics, guys, when you look at stats and you say, whoa, man, look at the success rate this year on this unit. Well, in Montana, for example, this is a Montana unit. In Montana, they do random surveys. The stats they're not worthless, but they're close to worthless, right? In this day and age, I don't understand why we don't have mandatory online reporting. I mean, let's just be real. But it's a random. They call me once a year, every 3 or 4 years.
Yep.
Hey, did you see any elk? Did you kill any elk? Oh, we don't need to know anything else. I'm like, what? So my point is, when you look at the stats, you have to take it with a grain of salt. So in these states that don't do mandatory reporting, or even if they do, what I like to do, now I realize, guys, this takes time, but all of the units that I'm interested in, here's what I do. I download all of the data for that unit for 5 years, and I do an average. I want to see, then I do an average, and then I rank it by what the other units I'm interested in. And this particular unit that we're going is always at the top every year, all the time. There's only a few units that are better than this, and they're all draw units. There's no
TMI, Mark.
Yeah,
TMI.
There's no unit. There's nobody. You're not going to be able to figure it out. But so anyway, it doesn't matter. The point is, there got to be huntable populations of elk there.
Right.
So once we figure out that there's good elk numbers there, then we start looking for the feature multiplication. Right. Now this spot is pretty remote too. So it's a llama spot, definitely. It's going to be really hard to backpack in here and get elk out. But it's just got all these basins and these north slopes and these benches and this habitat that it's really exciting. And I've hunted one fringe of it with pretty good success. Like we said, Bryce has hunted the other side of the fringe with pretty good success.
Right.
We just have this vision that when we get to the Holy Land in this middle, elk are just going to be standing everywhere, right? Now, more than likely, we'll hike up and you'll be like, yeah, Livesay, you don't know anything. There ain't elk. But
one of the things I want to key in here is you have your unit. You're doing your best to find out what the harvest rates, the stats are, how big animals are coming out of that unit each year during that season. 6-point bulls.
Bull to cow ratios.
Right. So you kind of have done the math on that. Now, you guys are already hunting either side of it. It's just a question of, well, how many maybe will be further in that center point? And if it's got the odds multiplication factors in there where you've got 5, 6, 7 features that would hold elk, it stands to reason there's some solid hunting in there. Probably better than a lot of draw tags that are out there.
And so here's the deciding factor this year. Mm-hmm. So we've always been excited about that for all the reasons we just said, but here's the number one reason that we're really excited.
Hit me.
In Montana, we've got the exceptional moisture year.
Yes.
We had snowpack. This is a really high spot for Montana. This is really high. Mm-hmm. Well, those really high spots in Montana usually they're good, but not during season. As September comes, they start to dry. So I'm seeing the elk there are starting to drop a little bit more. Not far, but just a little off the top because the tops dry out.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be the case this year. I think there's still snow up there. So by the time August, I think it's going to be exceptional grass high. So all the things are stacking up. So all the features are there, right? But we also got an exceptional moisture year. And like unprecedented moisture
I don't think people realize how much the snow, the moisture, and all that impacts the usage of an area by animals.
Especially, guys, for archery. By the time we get to September in a lot of Western states, people like go high, right? Yeah. Which I agree with for the most part. But I spent most of my 33 years hunting Colorado, right?
Yeah.
We're hunting elk at 11 to 13,000 feet there.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's so dry up high that the elk just have vacated. Now, there's a lot of sign.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sign they're there. Months, they've been there, and you're like captivated by all these rubs, and you just can't leave the area.
Right.
But they're not there.
They're not there.
They're just a couple more 1,000 feet down where those, it's like in Colorado, guys, there's always, not always, but there's a lot of daily showers, like 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
But not at the top.
Yeah.
It seems like the tops just stay dry. But when there is green at the top, that's where they want to be. There's less bugs. It's cooler. It's more remote usually. So on a high moisture year, there's nothing better than maximum altitude elk, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So I think everything's lining up for this spot because of that and the other elk finding features.
The where I've really saw this stand out was in more arid states, where you could see how just a little bit of moisture completely. You'll see coos deer and muleys in one section of the dry area. The next, and they're just packed in like sardines. The next year you come back, it's a different weather year, different moisture year, and all of a sudden those deer they're not within miles of that spot. They're completely way over here and in this other elevation plane. And the next thing that you see in those situations is in low moisture years, you see all these animals that have poor antler growth, like really poor antler growth. And Arizona was going on a multi-year drought a couple years ago, and Lampers and I were down there hunting, and we went from seeing, decent deer like size and being really impressed to over the next couple of years seeing everything just be small. Like we couldn't really like find a buck in the 160 class and above range. And we were seeing everything 170s to 190 a couple years before. What happened? It's not like all those deer got shot.
That's right.
They're all still there.
Same deer.
When I was talking to my friend Jim Deere, he is a wildlife biologist. Well, his handle on Instagram is Jim Deere. His son had done a study on antler growth in drought times. And they were showing that it was a 20 to 30 inch decrease in antler size on whitetail bucks.
Whitetails even.
In the South, like Texas. The study was done in Texas, a broad sweeping range in Texas. Similar to, the dryish country that you get in the desert, right?
Yeah.
And what they found was you're talking 20 to 30 inches smaller buck from the year before, just because of the dry season, the growing season. We were up here last week, and our buddy from Andrew Whitney was here from SG, and he was like, he was commenting on what a crappy antler season they had last year, where a lot of the bulls that should have been much larger than they just weren't. They were just probably 30 inches, 20 inches shorter than before, or even more.
Arizona can be a 50
I think
swing.
elk they have so much bone mass and stuff. I think that elk, in fact,
when it grows so quickly, the elk regenerate so fast, fastest growing, whatever they call it.
I think what you end up with elk is a more severe decrease in antler size. You see it in Arizona. My uncle's a guide there, High Point Outfitters. He's been there, Jay Scott. They'll talk about, don't put your 25 point draw in this year. Like, you're paying attention to the moisture content, because an animal will just blow up in a good moisture year compared to another. And this is what we're going into this season.
Well, and that's kind of, let's be honest, we're not going up there trophy yet. We're looking for big mature
Speak
bulls,
for yourself.
But I know you're going to be shit.
Look,
you missed last season.
Look,
so I know what's going to happen with the first
I was in the hospital last season.
You're going to be slinging arrows pretty much immediately.
Here's the thing. I just want to shoot something bigger than Ryan. That's it. I don't care. And Ryan's standard is super high. Yeah. So it all depends on how many days are left as well, because I don't want to come home without an elk either. So it's going to be a combo of factors, but I'm serious about trying to find a monster. But the problem, what I find is open country elk, where it's not very timbered. I can select the bull I want, and I can target that bull day over day, week over week, and I think I have a really good chance of getting the bull I want. In timbered country, you hear the elk, you get close, you spend your whole day trying to figure out what's there, and often you see it, and it's like, that's not the bull I'm after. I think your options are much more limited in dense cover, and you kind of take what opportunities present themselves. So this country that you're in,
it's a mix.
It's high. So I would assume it's similar to high country Colorado.
It is, but it's got
And how much time do you think they're going to be above timberline?
They're going to be right at the top this year.
So in that case, then it's pretty open country.
It's pretty open
with its little dense pockets on the top here and there pockets. Where there's a little fold.
In this country, we're gonna probably catch them moving in and out of timber. They'll be moving in and out to feed in these meadows, these basin meadows. I'm thinking, especially this particular basin that we're going to.
How far do they migrate from where they're feeding to where they're bedding? Is they just in the same exact spot?
I don't think up here. I think they get so little pressure in this spot that
they'll just be scattered.
They're just not going to move much.
It's a city of gold.
You know, they're going to move in a little bit. They're going to move out a little bit. You know, I want to talk here in a little bit, and I've read a lot of research. A lot of people get real confused about this, how far in the timber they go. And these studies are showing that these elk prefer the same distance on the inside as they prefer the distance on the outside of these edge or these meadow edges or fire.
What a fascinating
any edge. It's so weird how.
So if they come out 100 yards into the meadow, then they
retreat about the same.
About the same into the trees.
So a lot of guys think they got to march in the timber deep, but sometimes I think they're making a mistake.
Yeah.
And, you know, like in glassing, a lot of guys will glass and like, oh, there's no elk here. Well, remember, they prefer the 100 yards. It's really 50 feet, but they prefer that distance on the inside exactly the same as the outside.
Yeah.
So they may be feeding just as actively, just inside where you can't see them. So
I would like to see some solid directional winds that favor us on the hunt. Like if we can just get an all day uphill wind. Or all side, whatever it is, but something that just stays the same.
That's going to be a little challenging on this one because we're going to be at the tippy top, and you get the circulation.
I hate that crap.
I know, but it's just where they're going to be.
But usually, still, you can get on a point.
Yeah, we can figure it out.
Where the two winds come together, and a lot of times you can get that wind just shoot over the top or something like that.
And this range traditionally is cool. So I've been up there in even the hottest of years, and there's still snow there, even in August. Now, not a lot, but in the there's little pockets still.
Right.
I'm kind of counting on that because some of that's going to be our water sources. I'm hoping it's still there. I'm going to be analyzing it here pretty quick.
What an adventure, though!
It's going to be good. And but then if we don't turn up something there, Plan B for us is to go to more of your style. I got another spot that's going to be a lot more open, a lot more spot stock, a little more rolling, a little more gentle, still good north slope, still good feed, still good all the features, but just a little bit different of an environment.
And places that hold out because you've been there before.
Yeah, this spot I've been. Now, both of these spots, I've never been to the exact spots we're going because that's the way I go. Here's the thing, guys. I just don't like going to the same spots. I'm such an adventurer. I love new stuff. So I think there's you and
Lampers are similar in that way. There is a thing where Ryan's soul is comforted knowing that he has seen more country and knows little every time he adds a new pocket of land that no one knows about, or that he just feels so good.
Well, the thing is, though, I want
giant like pins, picture pins and inventory on your map system. It's like that inventory. The more it grows, the more his soul feels good about the world. Well,
and I want to be clear about this. This does not translate to success all the time.
I'm actually more like
a sure thing.
No. I like to go to a new area, but I also like to perfect an area. Yeah. I like to hunt it over and over.
There's a lot to be said for that,
and,
right?
Like know where they anticipate where they go, what they do,
That's
how
right.
they use
Guys,
it.
There's a lot of value to what you just said, right? Really learning an area.
Because a lot of guys, I think they don't understand the wind patterns, especially on some of these hunts, and they're like, "Oh, can't hunt it," and it's like you don't understand. Like there's a little creek right here, and there's shadows right here. That wind blows. You have a pocket if you stay right there, and if they can come within bow range. But if you violate the laws of nature, if you go 10 yards out of that pocket, it's over. The wind switches. See, there's these little gems of areas where you can stalk and sit and be patient and get chances playing with mountain wind. And I think there's so much more to that. You see these little cotton balls floating through the air here, and you can see what the wind is doing.
Yeah.
You can watch it go, and you can drop it off a ledge, and you can see it goes way over the top. And you can find these little areas to hunt and it's awesome. I think it's great. I think a lot of people don't realize how huntable that is. Now, for me, in areas like this, I hate calling. I don't want any elk to know that I'm there. Period. I want to maintain.
We're gonna have to get used to that.
I want to maintain all elements of surprise. All. Like the second you call, they either play or they don't, but they know something is going on.
Yeah.
So for me, I want to use calling very limitedly and strategically, and I found that I kill more than I do if I try to call. I'm every day is almost you're this close to tagging out when I don't call. Like, it's so good. And I think too many guys have a romantic, because you have this vision of you just walk out, perfect this calling, and they just walk to bow range and you shoot them, And the reality is much starker. It's more like you got to call 9 days straight all day long, and then one finally does play the game.
Yeah.
I don't like that. Yeah. It's not fun for me.
Yeah.
It's not as I also don't feel like I like to be the predator. I like to creep in. I like to know that they don't know I'm there.
Well, that's what's going to be new for me on this side with you is I'm traditionally been a caller. I mean, I've spot and stalked very little, a few times.
You're going to have fun, dude.
So I'm kind of excited to learn a little bit from you on that angle.
Bryce tailed me for, those days where I shot my bull. And he's like, this is crazy. I can't believe, we were sneaking in on bulls left and right. And he's like, I've never thought of this. And then when we butt crawled all the way into these elk, he's like, this is never going to work. This is never, Bryce, he's like, this is just not going to work. And I'm like, shut up, crawl. And we closed right in range. And then when the elk started to get fidgety and look at us at about 130 yards or so, because, eventually you're just in that bubble. They started to round up. There's a lot of chaos. And that's when I'm like, Bryce, we're going to decoy these elk, And I bend over, put my bow above my head and start walking like a elk or something with a rack. And I'm like, Bryce grabs my hips and he's bent over. And
I'd like to see
and
that.
We were like, he's bent over and we're both looking like a four-legged animal as we walk up, and I'm doing this and I'm bugling and cow calling. And these elk are just like, some of them look and they start feeding again. Other ones are like, nah, that ain't right. And we're on a diagonal like this, coming in on them and getting closer and closer. And Bryce is like, and it's brilliant. I mean, everything's working to plan. I have this giant bull about 65 yards. I'm getting ready to try to get that shot, and I'm ranging, and we're going along, and I'm moving. And we've been bent over now for quite a while, right? My back is burning a little bit. My legs are burning a little bit, but dude, there's an animal to get. Right. You suck it up.
Right.
Well, all of a sudden the elk are just looking at us like, nah, that ain't right. And some are barking and calling, and I'm like, doing my thing. And I turn and I look, and Bryce is standing upright with his back like this, totally wrecking the decoy. And I'm like, Bryce, get down. He's like, I can't. My back is on fire. I can't do it. I'm like, suck it up, Bryce. Oh, so man. He finally gets down. He's like, I can't do this. I can't do this. And then the elk finally sort of just exploded and went in different directions. And then it just became, I just ran into the center of him, ran up this mountain, popped over the top, and then there was a bull there and I shot him in the chaos. That wasn't at all exactly spot and stalk.
I don't know what you would call that. Herding them up.
That was aggression. That was pure aggression. But up until that point, we had, I've been passing on bulls that were much closer in range, coming to water holes. He's like, we can't sit those water holes because the wind blows on the hole. Well, there are some terrain features and some directionals where if you sit right here at 65 yards, they come in from this direction. I'm filming them. They're wallowing. They're doing all kinds of stuff. And here I am in bow range on these elk, and they come to 45, 50, and the wind is in my face on this point. If I go 20 yards to my left, the wind sucks down. And it's an elevation thing and thermals. And so those things are I think a lot of people don't realize because they spend a lot of time, calling.
Right. So
they haven't spent a lot of time understanding wind and directions. And I got to say, hunting blacktails when I was younger, whitetails in tree stands, that taught me a lot about wind.
Yeah,
and
me
wind
too.
direction.
In Missouri, that's all we did. That's what we did too. And so wind's a big, big deal. And when you put your stands up in the morning and you're going to set all day, you got to think about not only the morning, but what it's going to be when in the evening. And so, you know, and then if you set too low, you're looking straight on. They're going to see you move. If you sit too high, and then you got too steep of an angle.
Yep.
There's a lot of things with tree stand hunting and that teach you angle, compensation, wind, the thermals, you know, and so it doesn't apply 100%, but it gives you a good background to rely upon, you know, and, but the main thing is when you first get to an area too, is even if you're not seeing elk, you're just kind of hiking in all the way in. I'm constantly paying attention to what's happening. You're starting to analyze the area. You're getting the feel for it. So it's not only at the moment you need to know what it's going to be doing. You need to know what it's doing before that happens.
Right.
And so every morning we're getting up, I'm judging every day, like, okay, 9:00 is when we're starting to see the change. And like this year bear hunting, you know, we've been in there for several days and we got on this big bear, this meatball bear. And I told Hunter, I said, Hunter, I know he's in a bad spot, but at 4:30, we got to shoot.
Right.
If we don't shoot before 4:30, that wind's going to switch. So make sure you tell me, you know, 4:30, pay attention. 5:00, we weren't paying attention. I felt the wind on my back. I'm like, oh man. So we jump up and he was honest. He already had smelled us because we made a mistake. We went past the time and it was almost to the freaking minute, man.
Brad and I, same thing. You know, we'd sneak in on these elk and then we do the math because every day they were there at the same hillside. But if you have 50 cows and stuff and the bull is bedded at the bottom and the wind's blowing uphill and he has 50 cows between him and his bedding area, you're not getting him that day. Yeah. But you never know if he's going to get up and check his cows. So if you're 20 yards from the herd above with the wind in your face in the grass and he's here, you sit there all day hoping maybe he's going to come up. You never know what they're going to do. Come up and check all these different cows, which one's in heat or not, and come within bow range. But you have to be disciplined. You're like, I'm gone as far as I can go in this scenario. The wind's in my face, but I'm doing the math too because I know that it's going to take us about an hour and a half to butt crawl back out of here. And before the wind switches and blows downhill. So I got to be making my way.
You got an expiration.
Yeah.
And you got to live by that expiration.
And you need to give yourself, you have to sneak out. The whole point is not getting caught.
That's right.
That means you need lots of time to slow crawl back out of the area you're in. So that the next day, things change and you hunt them in the same spot each time. And what happened for us was, you know, the next day, he's bedded at the very top. And all his elk are behind him. He's a dead bull. Yeah. Dead bull. We creep to 50 yards and Brad shoots the bull. So, again, you know, by backing out and never being detected, by obeying the wind and just staying true. We actually got within bow range of the herd 3 days in a row. And on day 4, he bedded in a vulnerable spot and we killed him. A few days later, I was up and Brad was filming me. And same exact situation. We got in a couple times in a row. I didn't get a shot I was comfortable with. We backed out. We gave ourselves an hour and a half to climb out of there before the wind would switch. So we were well out of there. Now, it's hard to leave because you're like, he's close. I mean, he in the next hour, he might actually close 30 yards and give me a 50-yard shot.
But you got one chance for that to happen.
Exactly. And then they blow out of this canyon and
you got to start over.
And you got to start over. So it's like, play it conservative. As long as they don't know you're there, you're always still in the game.
Yeah.
We backed out, climbed up, got back to camp. Next day we go back in, same scenario, creep in. I'm 20 yards from all these elk and the bull is about 100 yards down the hill. But this cow next to me, she's 30 yards away and she is just whining, like sexy whining, like just the, you know how the whiny that just makes that bull scream every time he hears her. And I'm like, I know for a fact that bull, every time she makes a peep, all the other elk are making noise. Every time she makes a peep, he like bugles. And it's hot though. And he's just laying there but he wants to go up there, but you know, the day is progressing and I just keep crawling toward her, getting toward her, banking on the fact that he's eventually going to come check her. Well, she eventually, it's starting to cool down, you know, but it's well before our departure time. And that cow goes right down a little bit from me, about 55 yards or so, and that bull gets up after he hears her and just comes trotting up to her. And then I smoked him at like 70 yards. That whole scenario worked because day after day after day, we followed the wind patterns and we refused to get caught.
Yeah.
We refused to expose ourselves. Do you know how many times I wanted to just call and get him to stop? I made that mistake in years to pass. He's coming by kind of quick, chasing an elk, and I have him at about 55 yards, and the temptation is, get him to stop and then shoot. Well, if you don't make that moment count,
it's one shot.
You got 80 elk that turn and look at you.
Yeah.
And when they realize, like, you're not an elk, which gives you just a few minutes, they leave.
Yeah.
They're gone. And elk don't just run over the hill.
Yeah.
They go to the next state.
They'll relocate. You're not going to return them up the next day very easily.
And in country that's vertical.
Yeah. So Barney is speaking in this. I mean, he said something last week was just, it's so money about stalk. He said, whenever you stalk to failure, that's the end of the game.
Yep.
You know, too many guys like, if I just get 10 more yards, if I just get 5 more yards, go to your effective range and stop.
Yep.
Stop. Even sometimes short. Make a play that they're going to get up and make a move closer to you.
Yep. I learned that from hunting with Ryan.
Don't
stalk to failure.
Ryan is super patient. The dude is like ridiculously, almost to the point driving you nuts.
The first time it happened to me, we were in Arizona hunting coos deer. Brinker and I are up on the ridge. We're watching, and there's a giant buck rutting a doe in this little cool shadowed pocket. Ryan goes down the hill, and there's a little creek bed that goes right to where the buck is. And it's pretty quiet because it's a dried up, semi-wet creek bed. The grass, it's a real good stalking. Ryan gets down there to about 90 yards of the buck. Now, if he closes another 30 yards or so up that river bottom, he's in range. He stopped at that 90-yard point, and he crouched down in a spot, and he sat there for like 2.5 hours. And me and Brinker, and the buck comes out, and he kind of runs up here a little bit. He's probably 65 yards from Ryan. He goes back up on the hill, comes back down, and me and Brinker are like, does he not see him? It's right there. What's he doing? So for 2.5 hours, Ryan's sitting there, and then well before dark, he starts coming back out. And he comes to the top, and me and Brinker are like, what the hell was that? And he said, well, I'm trying to kill this buck. If I don't kill him today, I'll kill him tomorrow. And if I don't kill him tomorrow, I'll kill him on day 10. If I don't kill him on day 10, I'll kill him on day 17. He's like, I'm killing that deer. And I was like, whoa, he's like, day after day after day, I will come back here until that buck makes a mistake. And I was like, I never thought of that, really. And I doubted his ability to relocate the same deer over and over. So I was like, it's a couple of things I was skeptical about. And I'm like, but Brian, you could have just jumped in that creek bed and you could have crept up there 30 or 40 yards and you'd have just shot that buck. And he said, yeah. And then do you know how many mistakes I could make? Like a little twig here, a little branch there, a little rock that tumbles a little bit. Like once I move into that bubble, and I'm sneaking to try to close. I'm inside that 90-yard mark already, and now I'm trying to get 80, 70, 60. He's like, the odds of me overcoming that coos deer senses, and getting in that range, it's just not there.
Yeah.
It's maybe, but that's stalking to failure.
Yeah.
He's like, right now that deer has no idea I'm there. I was right there. He's like, he's running that doe. I saw him come up and down that creek a number of times. It was just as likely that he came by at 20 yards as that he didn't.
Yeah.
So I waited. And then he's like, and then I backed out because the wind was going to switch. So I made sure I had plenty of time to sneak out of there. Tomorrow I'll come back and he'll be down here again. And I'll do this every day until he makes a mistake. And 2 days later, he got within range and he had a 20-yard shot. And the buck was like 100 yards above him, 120 yards way up there. But Ryan got into a rock crevice, did the same thing he'd done a few days in a row, and that deer and that doe just came down the trail where he anticipated they probably were going to make a circuit and come down. Doe runs by, he comes to full draw in a rock crevice, and as soon as that buck ran out, it stopped, didn't even have to make a sound, Just stood there and he smoked it at 20 yards. Coos deer, Boone and Crockett. And it's like irritating, but also like that blew my mind. And then he would relocate the same deer for 15, 20 days in a row. So then that's when I started hunting the same way. I started to not hunt to failure. I started to get within the bubble and then wait for them to make a mistake. I stopped taking marginal shots. I'm like, if I don't have a perfect shot, then I'm just going to wait for that perfect shot. And I found that sometimes I wouldn't get any shot at all because I passed on all the marginal ones. But then that animal would go around the corner or do something, and then a few minutes later, it'd come right back. Or you were still in the game. And I started to realize that I had much better opportunities by being patient. And pretty soon I started to do that. Then I started to be able to relocate the same deer over and over and over. I hunted 16 days for that Arizona buck I shot the year before last. 14, 16, something like that. I relocated that buck. I was on him like 12 days. I relocated him 9 of those 12. There were 3 days where I just couldn't turn him up that day. But it taught me so much. Yeah. Like to find, and sometimes it was in a 3 to 5 mile radius that I'd relocate him. That was like fascinating to me. And eventually the same thing happened. I would just back out. Perhaps I was conservative. The last day of the hunt, the night before the last day, I know I only have tomorrow. I have that buck at low light at about 80 yards. It was so tempting to shoot. I was shooting well. I was shooting each day, some blocks, and I was shooting out to 80, and I was feeling pretty good about it. But still, that's not a shot I want.
Yeah.
And I'm ranging that buck, and I'm like, I don't want this shot. Knowing that I still have tomorrow and he doesn't know I'm here. And if I back out, he'll probably be here in the morning. So it was hard. It was really hard. It's not in my nature to do that. And I had to have that opinion, that attitude, like maybe I don't get anything at all. It was like, I either want that unmissable opportunity or no opportunity. So I didn't take that marginal shot. I backed out, came back the next day. Sure enough, he was there. I did 2 or 3 stalks throughout the day on him and just got in his bubble. But he never came to me. Finally, toward the last light, later in the evening, I saw a bunch of this herd, like water in this little tiny rock depression in this dried up creek bed. There's a little puddle in this rock. I saw him drink and go up the hill, drink, go up the hill, drink, go up the hill. So as soon as that wind was in my face, as the sun was coming down, I sprinted, got in his position. No sooner had I settled into my pocket, and he comes around the corner with that doe, hits that water source that I'd seen the other deer get up a little. The younger critters kind of got up a little bit earlier, hit that thing. He comes right to it, and I smoked him at 40. That was a long hunt, but that situation was being patient, waiting, relocating, getting in the bubble, waiting for them to make a mistake, rather than me try to push in, which is, like Barney was saying, it pushes you to that you're hunting to failure. It's either going to work or it's going to blow up.
There's only 2 outcomes.
And this way, I had all the time in the world. He came to me. He gave me the perfect situation. I didn't have to risk. There was one moment when I was at full draw, and he was going to dip down into some rocks in this cut and be behind some brush. And he was running a doe, so he's not predictable when he stops and goes. And a few times he stopped, but at 55, and I knew he's probably going to come right here to 38 or 40. And I wanted to shoot a couple of times, but I'm like, he's going to be right here. So I let him come. And then I almost called. Before he went into this little cut, because I was like, but then he'd look, he'd be alerted. The doe might just run. Like you hand over the keys to the kingdom when you do that. You're at their mercy.
For coos that were switched.
So this deer, he's standing there, and next thing you know, he goes in this little drop. I didn't make a peep, and they get a little drink, and then instead of going further down, they pop right back out. I mean, smoked him. He didn't have any idea I was there. I feel like that level of patience keeps lending itself to success that I don't get from by hunting to failure?
Well, last year, elk season, Ryan was on a hunt. He drew a really great tag, and he was in the spot, and he had a chance to go after a really big animal, mature animal. And I was on a solo hunt the same day. And Ryan rarely texts me during elk season. And I started getting all these texts. And he's sending me phone scope pictures. We happen to have cell, He's sending me phone scope of this bull, this giant bull, right?
Yeah, he sent him to
And I'm like, day after day, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, Ryan, what are you doing, man? Yeah, he's going to make a mistake. He stayed on that bull for days and days and days. And then
he went home.
His daughter had to play in a basketball tournament.
Yeah.
So he leaves and drives, double-digit hours home, goes back, relocates the same bull, gets back on him again, sleeping with him every day until he made a mistake. And finally he got in a position that Ryan felt like it was a good position, 100% all in, killed the bull.
Yeah.
And it was days. I mean, he was 10 days on the same bull. I don't know if that was the exact number, but multiple days, right?
You don't see that kind of patience generally.
I have our time with that. So I'm learning from that, from him and you too. So I'm kind of excited about this hunt with this because now when I call, I have switched my calling though. I've learned a lot from Joel. I've kind of, with Phelps and Dirk, I've spent a lot of time with these guys the last couple of years. I've learned so much, but the one thing that I've adapted to my own calling is I rarely make cow calls anymore because I just feel like that's the alert symbol. It's kind of like it can backfire on you.
Yeah.
But when I'm using strictly calf call only, I feel like you can get away with it. They can come or they don't come, but it doesn't cause you problems.
Right.
When you start bugling or you start cow calling, you're kind of all in.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, it's either going to work or it's not.
Right.
But it seems like they really tolerate those calf calls, like little fine calf calling. Can work for me, especially.
It's so ignorable.
Exactly.
It's like the kids that are running around and you're just like, you tune them out.
Yeah, so I tend to try to stick to that until I have to do something more aggressive. But I've been a caller, so I've got to get out of the mode. Now, let's be honest, though. Most of my hunting has been thicker. I just haven't chased elk in wide open country till I moved here to Montana.
Yeah.
Colorado, I had opportunities, obviously, a little bit of spot and stalk, but here in Montana, Idaho, some of these Wyoming, some of these other states, they have a lot more country conducible to this spot and stalk stuff. Yeah. So I'm excited about trying it. And you just can't argue it. I mean, Brian never carries a call anymore. Brian Barney, no calls.
Yeah.
Ryan rakes more if he does anything at all.
Yep.
You got to put them up completely. I mean, so some of these killers are really turning the corner on some of this stuff because they are putting their calls up. And but you've got to acquire a whole new set of skills. But you're like Brian says, if you just don't do it, you're always in the game. The minute they know you're there, you're at a disadvantage. Things can work out.
They might play your game. They might not.
But they might not. But let's just be honest. There's nothing more adrenaline filled than a screaming bull coming into a bugle.
I mean, Corey Jacobson has said that a number of times.
That's just what he prefers.
As we get into this debate, he's like, I have no interest at all in this other. If it doesn't happen this way for me, I'm not interested.
Yeah, he'll hike all day until he gets one that wants to play the game.
And I remember he did this spot and stalk on a Randy Newberg hunt because they just couldn't call an elk in for nothing. And there's an elk bedded in this wide open spot. And Corey does this painfully 3 hour, like super long stalk. It's on video. You can find it on Randy Newberg's channel. Corey kills this bull. And at the end of it, he's like, "Oh my gosh, that was just the worst ever. I was so tired. This is," later I'm like, "Wasn't that awesome?" He's like, "No, the whole thing sucked. The whole time I'm like shaking, I'm crawling, I'm in the dirt." And he's like, "It was totally not fun at all." And I'm like, "Wow, like that is to me, that's what I want to feel. That sort of tense encounter, but play to your strengths. I hear people say all the time to guys like, you shouldn't be shooting 80 yards. You shouldn't shoot 90 yards. And I often I think, like, have you seen this guy shoot?
Yeah.
Like, this is his gift. Yeah. His gift is 90-yard shots.
Yeah.
Can this man sneak to 50 yards? No, that ain't his gift. He's got 2 left feet, and he's loud as you can be. Like, why would he play to that strength that's, turn away from his gift and just bumble through the woods, never getting in range? Where another guy, like Kip Fowler, He was on my podcast a couple years back, and he's like, yeah, I'm not a good archery shooter. Like, I get mocked. I miss badly. Like, he's like, that Superman buck, I think it was that Superman buck he shot in Utah. He's like, I think he missed him once or twice before he finally killed him. He's like, on average, a lot of my biggest bucks I've missed once before I finally killed him the second arrow, like on a different day.
Yeah.
I'm like, really? You're that bad? He's like, man, but guess what? He makes up for it with his gift, which is being stealthy, sneaky, knowing where they are, scouting, all that stuff gets him there. So to me, you got to know you.
Yeah.
You got to know what your talent, what your gifts are, what you love to do, and then trust that. When I started listening to my own instincts instead of following the advice of other people, both in my shooting and my hunting and all that, I started having vastly higher degrees of success. And a big part of that was just because I know me better than most people. I know what I'm pretty good at, because I couldn't recall being on these hunts where I'd be like, well, this guy has killed, 20 more bulls than me, mule deer. And you're like, okay, here's the animal. What should I do? And they're like, well, if it was me, I would do da 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 da. And I'm looking at that and I'm like, oh, that sounds like an awful plan to me. I'm thinking I would go here and do this. And that guy's like, no, not me. I'd do this every time. So I'm like, well, he knows better than me. So then I would do it his way. What I wasn't putting together was he's not me. Yeah. His skill, his approach, his style isn't quite me. Mm-hmm. And when I started following my own gut, like, oh, I see this little grassy shoot right here. It's quiet. It's cool. The wind's blowing up. I think I can crawl through that and pop up and get this shot. And the other guy's like, oh, I just come from above and I get to that cluster of trees and I come around and I'm like, but for him, that could be more conducive to what he's capable of doing versus what I'm capable of doing, like differently. And when I started just following my gut, I started to kill way more. So now I'll ask Ryan, well, what would you do? And Ryan will tell me. I'll ask the group, we'll brainstorm, as a group. And then, I'll evaluate. And often I'll be like, I don't want to do it that way. This is just, I feel better about this. And I trust myself and I do it how I would do it. Yeah. And that has paid huge dividends. And there's more than one way to skin a cat. It's very possible that their way could have worked.
Right.
But the more that I have paid attention and listened to my instincts, the more I've been successful. And that, too many people, I think, especially agreeable people, they tend to defer to others that have more experience. And at some point, and Ryan told me to go hunt solo a whole bunch. And so I did. And I killed a couple of bulls solo. Once I did that, all of a sudden, I'm like, it was a confidence booster. It also let me know, there was no one there to defer to. It was just me. Yeah. I had to figure it out. And that also helped me realize that I should trust myself more.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I got a friend. I'm not going to name names because I hate saying people take long shots, Mm-hmm. But this dude, I've watched him smoke 2 bulls. One was a 390 at 81 yards.
I know who you're talking about.
And the dude's he's a rock at the distance, right? The dude couldn't hit a barn at 20, but at 80, the dude can thread a needle. And that's not true, but he's just a great, calm, stable, but he also knows, he also has so much experience. He knows if that elk is on alert at all, he can't make that shot. Right. If that bull isn't completely relaxed, if it's a calling situation, he never try that shot, right? It's got to be a bull can't know you're there for an 80-yard shot, right? The sound of the bow, anything can make a move.
Also, that shot's not a shot that he would make in his 20s.
That's right.
That's a shot he makes now after years.
Super experienced at it, done it over and over again.
It's a shot we all would have taken in our 20s.
Probably. I don't know if I would have or not, but anyway, he's just super consistent at it. And he killed a giant bull a couple years ago and just absolutely majestic. And that bull, that's all he had. He knew that he could make. He just sat there and waited 3 hours till he gave him a shot, and boom, there it was. And he went 30. That bull went 30 yards and dead. Yep. So, yeah.
You got to play to your strengths. You got to know where you're at. And that's where, on a hunt, if I'm not, often I'll going into the hunt, I'll be shooting paper plates. If my paper plate, if I every arrow I shoot is in a paper plate out to 55, I know I'm kind of 100%.
Yeah.
Right out to 55.
Yeah.
But if I get, I fire 10 arrows and 6 of them are in the plate at 80 and 4 of them aren't, I'm 60%.
That's right.
I don't like that. No, why not get closer?
I did a video one time. What I do is kind of test myself.
Mm-hmm.
I do 25 arrows, paper plate.
Yeah.
Well, 16-inch circle, whatever. Elk kills them, right? Cold.
Yep.
Walk out of the house with my pack on, with my bino harness on. If I can't put all 25 in every time, that's not my effective range.
Yep.
And whatever, before I go, if let's say it's 70, I can walk out and then I know that's my range. I will not take a shot over that. And more than likely, I won't even take that.
Yeah.
Because when you shoot lights out at 70 and you say 50 is your limit, it's guaranteed almost.
Yeah.
Because you're so confident at that 50,
yep.
even though you can do a 70, it just makes the 50 seem easy, right?
Yep.
So a lot of guys right here right now shooting 100, right? We've been shooting 100, 120. Mm-hmm. We're not going to shoot at animals 120. But when you can drop 10 arrows into a pipe plate at 100 yards, you're like, man, 70 seems like a piece of cake. 50 seems like a chip shot. And so I always recommend, we talked about this, Ironman guys that train for Ironman used to kill me like they do 18-mile runs.
Yeah.
And the run's 26.
Yeah.
I'm like, guys.
Well, I think a lot of guys have a lot more shot anxiety the closer they get to the target than far away. Because sometimes when the target is 100 yards away, you cannot effectively line up your pin to the dot.
Right.
It's just impossible. And so guys accept the flow. They just like, it's drifting, it's somewhere in there, and they go through a process, the closed loop. They slowly shoot, and then when that arrow breaks, it's more or less a surprise, and it just floats into position because you don't get punchy.
Yeah. Because
there's no point. But when the target's 30 or 40 yards away, and you're like sticking it on there and forcing it, and you're like, now. To me, there's a lot of shot anxiety that comes from that, where long shots, especially with like a hinge or something, a lot of times long shots are just like, we're just letting it go. And guys have better habits at long range than they do close.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, that's probably true. But we've been here shooting dropping some bombs more than I ever normally shoot. And, but it's making that 50-yard shot seem pretty dang easy.
But I do what you do. I've shot quite a few animals at, 70 plus, and I've shot a couple elk at around 75 yards. I shot a coos around 70, and I shot a muley at 92. But I had been out there, like you said, at 90, 95, anywhere in there. I'm dialing. I'm just like putting it in there. I did the Alpha Bow Hunting Challenge, and I won the Old Man Division that year. Like, I just was on, right? I was just shooting the bow, the rig, everything was set up right. I had really good, sharp habits, and I was just killing it. Went out there, and I was doing a lot of Total Archery Challenge events, and I went out and on this hunt, and that afternoon, I just stuck everything in a paper plate. I didn't miss at 90. Everything was in the plate. Shot all day, all afternoon. So we went out for an evening hunt because it was summer and these things are bedded in a hot day, and then they get up in the evening. We get out there and it's the last day of the hunt, and I'm like, I'm shooting a buck 90 to 95 if a nice buck gives me that shot. It did. Stood up, I ranged, dialed, had all the time in the world, and I executed the shot just like I did an hour earlier on the paper plate and smoked that deer. But I knew, I was very confident that I was on, that I'm not missing this range. You go on a 10-day backpack hunt, and I don't know where it's hitting exactly after 10 days. I'm not as sharp. I'm changing adjusting
your
everything.
Range. Yeah. Yeah.
And again, this super desert open country, I'll shoot further than I do. You can always get closer in some thicker stuff.
Yeah.
But like I said, it goes back to knowing your abilities, playing to your strengths, rather than, trying to be somebody you're not.
Right. That's good stuff, and that's a lot of these summits is here's, all this, these guys come here. One of the real goals here is to really add the tools to their toolbox. We've been talking about this spot and stalk, and it's not my forte yet, but I've been hunting elk for 33 years.
Yeah.
You can always learn something new. Yeah. So I'm really excited. I've really never had a mentor with the spot and stalk. Like now that I've met you and Ryan, we haven't elk hunted yet, so this will be a first time. I'm excited about it. But, I've been around a lot of callers, really good callers. And I like to fancy myself as a pretty good caller. And, coming from Missouri for all those years, we just thought that's what you did.
Yeah.
And it works. I've had a lot of success with it, but again, they're like rifle season. It's funny. Like I've killed a lot of elk with the rifle. I've killed some with the bow, and but the rifle elk, I'm always spot and stalking.
Right.
And I never, it's, and I try to get pretty close. I mean, like we do bear hunting. We don't like to take, bear meat means a lot to me, man. I don't want, and they're soft until you hit a shoulder.
Yeah.
And so we've talked about that until we're blue in the face, but we want that 300, 400 yard shot. That's what we're looking for. And same with elk. I mean, I can shoot them at 5.6, but I'd much rather have that shorter. So I realize that's a lot easier than an archery, but.
Well, I feel like this place that we're headed, it's going to be a nice blend of all that.
It's going to be a mix.
We should have it to ourselves primarily. And I believe, so long as we keep the llamas back, camp in a certain spot, and we get in there and we come out every day, they have no idea we're there. I think we're going to have lots of great opportunities to kill.
I agree. And there's several. The great thing about this is, we talk about plan A, B, C, and D, and there's about 7 or 8 basins in here.
Yeah.
Within 4 or 5 miles. So we can just keep what I like to call progressively hunting. We can just keep moving basins until and then even on the way back, hit them again. I mean, we hit them out, hit them back.
What's nice about unpressured elk is that they are vocal. Yeah. They're more vocal, and they don't, they're vocal, and they don't stick to cover tight and watch their back so much. They just kind of walk out in the open, and you'll see them just spread out in the grass just without a care in the world, and that makes the assessment of the area and how to hunt it and everything so much easier. The hardest part about elk, though, is in spot and stalk is the herds. So you're not just sneaking up on one. It's like, especially when they get all piled up deeper into the rut.
Yeah.
Then it gets really difficult because in order to get to the elk that you're after, you got to go through 2 different herds of smaller groups or satellite bulls or whatever to get there. And your biggest risk is blowing up, having some other elk that you're not after blow out and bust you.
In this area, particularly, at least from my experience, I've only been in this area twice, and not even on the fringes of this. The bull to cow ratio is extremely high, so there's a lot of random bulls hanging around these herds. So it's going to be, like you said, it's going to be a little challenging to get to the big guy, and so we'll see how that goes. But we were calling a lot, and we just kept calling in these satellite bulls right and left. We couldn't get those bigger bulls to cooperate, but we were getting really nice, these satellite bulls, and some of these satellite bulls are freaking herd bulls in other areas. But it's going to be a new challenge for me for that, and I'm looking forward to it. We got to talk about what dates we're going to try to do it, because that's kind of important too, as they start to herd up, too.
Yep.
Good.
Well, folks, I hope you got something out of this show. I'm excited for the season. It's that time of year. Hope you're all preparing for your elk season.
It's not too late. I mean,
now's the time. If you haven't, and if you have, Mark's e-scouting course for elk, it's the best that's out there.
Thanks.
And it's worth every penny. So you should check it out. Use the code GRITTY because that helps me do what I do.
That's right.
And right now, I think you have a couple of months to really hone in your hunting area, and you cannot go. I'm just telling you, you cannot go wrong with Mark's. What is it? A 40-hour class?
It's about 30 hours of video. It's got text and video. So if you're more of a learner from a reading perspective, you can read basically the script of the video.
Yeah.
And so I did include some of the text. Now the examples don't have text, but the theory stuff has text. And then obviously everything's video driven.
Yeah. It's empowering.
And it's self-paced, and they're broken up into, I think there's 33 modules. Each one of them is about an hour. Some are a little less than an hour.
And the thing
it keeps track of where you're at, so you don't have to do it all at once. And I will tell guys, I know it's long, but here's the thing I keep hearing over and over again. Man, the second time I listened to it, I caught all these little nuances I didn't catch the first time, right? So I always recommend, guys, I know it's significant time, but kind of go through it once, kind of quick. Don't get too caught up in it. And the second time, I think you'll be surprised at some of the small things you'll pick up, like especially in the technology stuff, like file types and little nuances here, little nuances there. I keep hearing that. So, it's like anything else, Brian. You get what you put into something, right? Yeah. If you want to take a 2-minute course on how to unhook, that you're going to get 2 minutes worth of knowledge. Right. And, it's pretty classroom driven. This is not, I always say this, guys, and maybe it's a bad approach, but I'm education first, entertainment second. I like to have fun with it. Like,
hopefully we can change that with our bear modules.
Yeah, we're going to have a little more fun with it, but it's pretty freaking to the point. Lecture, do it this way, do it this way, do it this way, without a lot of.
I look at it like this: when I got a dog, new lab, and I was training it to duck hunt and just be a family, pet. You can invest in that window of time. You can invest. You can live with that dog for 10 or 12 years, 14 years, right? And the first year or two, you can put a lot of time into their training, their teaching, their education, and then you can enjoy the fruits of your labor for the next 10 or 12 years of just pure joy, because this dog is dialed, well-trained, effective, a joy to be around. You have a strong relationship, tight bond, and it protects your family, so on. It's just a gift. Or you can be one of those people that doesn't train your dog at all, just lets it kind of go, and then for the next 10 or 12 years, it's a pain in the ass that you're just constantly chasing, struggling with, and dealing with. And it's like you're gonna keep the dog anyway, no matter what. So that's your goal, right? So why not put in the effort in the beginning so you have a joy rather than a burden? Yeah. And I look at, you're going to go on these elk hunts anyway. You're going to go on the elk hunts anyway. So why not put in 30 hours, 2 hours a week, 3 hours a week, 1 hour, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 10 weeks in, you've got it all dialed. And I'm telling you, as a hunter for elk, if you invest that up front, you will have the next 20 or 30 years of massive benefits from it, because the data and the information is that valuable.
And you won't realize what you historically are starting to bank. Like, once you kind of go through some things and then you start looking at it, you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Oh, and you'll add some of your own, flair to it. But I think that I think you'll get a lot out of historical knowledge that will hang with you. Mm-hmm. You'll learn about yourself.
Once you learn it once, it's yours forever.
And it's not all about finding elk, too. This course has got a lot about elk food in it. It's got a lot about hunt planning. Yeah. It's got a lot about zones of pressure we talked about. So it's not all about, so there's a lot, and even using your limitations, like really understanding what your group and your limitations are. Like, I think we're going to be a pretty good team now Bryce is probably going to be we're going to have to work to the lowest common denominator. Let's just be honest. Correct.
Like, Bryce is going to be camp cook while we ditch him and go kill.
Bryce, we'll probably have to put him on a lead or something, but, we only can hunt as a group to our weakest. That's not a negative. I'm just saying. So you got to understand your dynamics.
That's why Ryan leaves us all behind and goes hunt by himself.
But we know that. He knows it. We're comfortable with it. We've accepted. We're not crybabying it because we're not up there. And as long as everybody's on the same page, you're effective. But when you go out and you're like, oh, man, you're not near the shape you told me you were, and it becomes a real negative. Mm-hmm. And so setting up your group dynamics is important, and that's part of it too.
I want to talk to you a little bit about the mule deer hunt that I have, but also you're an ex-Ironman athlete, like we talked about earlier. You've done a lot of things. You're also old, but still kicking it, crushing it. And I mean, I'm old too, I guess. I'm right on your heels, but
50's coming for you pretty soon, right?
Ryan's 48 a few weeks before me, and then I turned 47 shortly after. In fact, I think our birthdays are just a week or two apart.
We have the same birthday. Ryan and I.
Oh, do you?
Same day.
October
20th.
Okay, so
I'm just a few years ahead.
So mine's October 13th. So I'm 48 I'm 47 when he's 47 for about a week.
So I'm 56. So
yeah. So not far behind. I feel like I'm doing the best I can to maintain health and wellness going up into the older age. I feel good. I feel great. Yeah. But I would like to get your input on two things. Over the years, I think one of the things that is unique about certain individuals is there's a mental toughness that some people have that they've cultivated throughout life, and other people, they want it, but they don't know how to get it. They don't have it. Because, we can do all the things that we want to. We can do the whole CBD oil, stealthy nutrition, krill oil, eat right, turmeric, have the whole foods diet, all that kind of stuff. And that's very important. Eat the right fluids, all that stuff. Pack the right nutrition. That's all good. Fitness, exercise. But there are dudes I know that are in great shape that still quit and go home.
Yeah.
So I want to talk to you about that on the next podcast.
We've seen it over and over again. I've been a lot of examples of it.
Did you ever quit an Ironman?
I did quit one time. My number 2 at my second Ironman. You know what happened?
How many did you do?
12. So my second one. I had just met Amy. We were dating.
Yeah.
And she wasn't doing Ironmans yet. She's like, I don't know why you do this to crap. She goes, you're in the medical tent every freaking time. And so I had done my first Ironman, and it was sketch. And the second one, I had all these dreams that I was going to do this certain time, right? I had these preconceived
goals.
I wanted to break 11 hours, right? 10-hour Ironman. Anything in the 10s in the Ironman world is kind of like you're kind of legit if you can do it, right?
Yeah.
And I was on the run. I was about halfway through the run. It was a looped run too. That was the other problem. It's a 3-loop run. I hate those. It's because you see the finish line 3 times and it's just like calling your name.
Right, right.
And then Amy's like sunburned. Watching an Ironman is like watching paint dry. Don't ever take your loved one to watch you do an Ironman. And so Amy's on the side of the road, burned, waiting for me. And I come by the second time and I was like, I was off my time. I wasn't going to make it. Everything, wheels were coming off. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I think I'm going to quit. She goes, I think you should quit.
That didn't help.
And so she goes, yeah, whatever. And so I quit, went home. Dude, it was probably the worst and the best thing that ever happened to me. Because for the next year, all I could think about was, dude, so here's what happened. I quit, and I still had to go to the dang medical tent. I got so dehydrated. So I was in the medical tent for 2 hours getting IVs, right? So I'm laying there with double IVs, and there's a dude next to me. He started talking to me. He goes, man, how does it feel? And I'm like, I said, I feel fine. I'm just sick. And he goes, man, I wish I could have done it. He goes, I would have given anything. I couldn't make the cutoff on the bike. He couldn't make the cutoff. And, he goes, I just couldn't do it. And I'm like, I didn't want to tell him that I quit. He thought I had finished. I was just in there afterwards and hit me right.
Stolen valor right there.
And I'm like, I had all kinds of time to finish in the cutoff, right?
Right.
But I was a big freaking baby.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't doing my time. I quit. So not only did I hurt myself, but I took some away from him. Mm-hmm. I just felt like that guy would have given anything to have been able to finish.
Yeah, because I want to talk about that because it was the expectation here. And then it's sort of like a hike coming, heading into a spot. And you're like, oh, okay, I'll be there in about 2 hours. It's right there. And you realize you're 4 hours, 5 hours out from the spot.
That's right.
A lot of guys, that's their mental break. They snap right there. They're like, I had this idea that this was my finish, and now that it's not my finish,
been prolonged.
Now I just can't do it. I'm
Dude,
done.
Overcoming that. So anyway, I said it was the best and the worst thing. We talk about it again, but I never even doubted. No matter what happened. Like when I went to a world championship in Hawaii, right? Mm-hmm. I had done an Ironman in May. Amy and I both went to Brazil on our honeymoon. We did an Ironman on our honeymoon, which I don't know how I pulled that off. That's the only way she got me to marry her. I said, I'll marry you if you could do an Ironman. And so we went, and we both qualified for the world championships. One of the rare husband-wife in the same race. So we got really busy that year. We had a bunch of races that we were putting on, and we didn't train much that summer. We still had our fitness from the first, but we let it slide. So anyway, we both go to Hawaii a little undertrained. That's not the place to go undertrained. It's hostile there. Mm-hmm. It's hot. It's brutal. It's hilly. It's everything, you know? So we both had terrible races, right? But there's no doubt we're not going to that finish line. And it was just a pleasure. Even though I think I went 11 hours and something there. I was happy the whole time because I just knew I was going to finish. There was never a question that I was going to make it that finish line. I had given up the goals of my time, and I never did it again. All the Ironmans I'd done after, all the half Ironmans, the full marathons, never looked at it as I always wanted to go fast as I could.
Yeah.
But when I couldn't, I just couldn't.
Right.
But I was always stayed in the game. I did what I could do at the moment I could do it.
Yep. I love that. Well, let's get into that on the next one.
Okay, man. Pleasure.
Folks, thanks for tuning in. Check out Treeline Pursuits, Mark Livesay, Treeline Academy. Get the e-scouting courses. They're great.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for tuning in. Stay gritty.